Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. I'm very happy to take a call on the Building Pools Amendment Bill. And I want to exercise a note of caution because this bill deals, and the definitions that this bill contains, it deals with swimming pools, and the definition which is contained in Part 1 defines a swimming pool as any excavation or structure of any kind normally used for swimming, paddling or bathing, or any product other than an ordinary home bath that is designed or modified to be used for swimming, wading, paddling or bathing, but does not include an artificial lake. The point that I want to stress at the outset is that any body of water has the potential to be a place where someone can drown. And I know this from personal experience because my parents will share a terrible story about my brother, which could have been even more terrible, about him splashing in a bucket of water when he was an infant, and the handle on the bucket of water came down on the back of his neck. So the handle had been standing up, he was splashing around in a bucket of water, which you can just imagine an infant toddler splashing in a bucket of water, and the handle came down on the back of his neck. Now a bucket would not be captured by the definition of a pool, but would certainly have a depth potentially of more than 400 millimetres, because buckets can typically taller than that. So a body of water as small as a bucket could be enough to drown an infant. And that's the point that I want to make, because when we're talking about a pool, actually some of the biggest risks of drowning for infants are where they're left unsupervised with any body of water, whether it be a paddling pool, a bucket, a baby bath, and all of those things, they can drown in them. And so therefore, there is always going to be an element of education required around that, to make sure that parents know that even the home bath, you cannot leave a toddler, unsupervised in a home bath. That is actually, they're just as likely to drown if left unsupervised in a bath at home as they are if they're left unsupervised in a paddling pool. And so we do need to make sure that we're communicating about that. And so I particularly support clause 162D, which requires the manufacturers and retailers of any such products to actually notify people around what their requirements are. So if you're buying a paddling pool, then actually you should be notified what the requirements around the paddling pool are. The question that I've got for the minister in charge of the bill and for the government is the situation around temporary paddling pools, because this is the sort of thing that does get raised with members of parliament all the time. The idea that if you get one of those inflatable paddling pools, you blow it up in your backyard, your kids or grandkids is probably more likely to be the case in my family, are splashing around in the paddling pool. We're always under adult supervision. When it's finished, the paddling pool gets drained, it gets folded up, it gets put away. Where does the fencing requirement sit there? Because are we expecting people who are using a paddling pool for a hot, sunny afternoon to be putting a fence around it? Or would it be more appropriate to say that there must be supervision? There's no question that a paddling pool should not be left unattended and unsecured, but in the case of a temporary pool, would it be sufficient to simply say that there has to be adult supervision for the period of time that that pool has water in it? In Upper Hutt, we would have it out almost every day of the summer, I have to say, to Ruth Dyson. But that's right.
3 days.
It would be very regularly used. But actually, I raise this point because this is important, because this is the sort of thing that the members of the public are likely to raise with us. This idea that restrictions have gone mad, where you have to put up a fence around a temporary paddling pool that's only there for a matter of hours. So the question I've got for the government is, and it's not clear from the bill, I've just sat down and read through the bill, it's not clear from the bill where those temporary paddling pools exist, what the rules around those would be. Because I can certainly support quite restrictive requirements around permanent swimming pools, but the ones around temporary paddling pools, I think we do have to have an element of common sense when it comes to that, and so I'm interested in the government's view on that. The other point that I want to make is the new restrictions around spa pools or hot tubs, those with lockable child-proof lids. And I actually think that there needs, if the Parliament is going to go down the road of saying that they should be exempt from the fencing requirements, We also then need to look at the enforcement, Mr Chair.
Chris Hipkins.
At the enforcement requirements around using of those lids. Now, I lived in a house that had a spa pool in the backyard with one of the lockable lids. The whole of the backyard was also fenced, but the pool itself was not fenced. But hand on heart, I couldn't say that the pool was always locked. The lid would have always been closed, but I cannot say that if a child had got into the backyard that they wouldn't have been able to open it, because while there was a locking mechanism, the locking mechanism wasn't always used. And simply putting a sign on it isn't necessarily going to deal with that. But there is a degree of responsibility required to pool owners, that if they're going to exempt themselves from the fencing requirements and put a lockable child-proof lid on their pool, there does need to actually be a requirement to use it, and some sanction if you don't use it and something were to happen. So I'm interested in hearing more about that, because again, I couldn't see from the bill, particularly because spa pools and hot tubs are exempted from the inspection requirements. How on earth would the use of a lockable lid be enforced? Because you know, a spa pool could certainly be again a place where a child could quite easily drown.